The small repair shop reeked of motor oil, gasoline, and the faint tang of burnt rubber that lingered in the air like a stubborn ghost. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh white glow on every corner of the space, highlighting the clutter of tools, spare parts, and discarded rags strewn across the concrete floor. Jake crouched beside the hood of a battered pickup truck, his hands slick with thick black grease, smearing it across the engine as he adjusted bolts and examined hoses. Every motion was deliberate, precise, and practiced. His fingers knew the contours of engines better than they knew the warmth of human hands. Sweat trickled down his forehead, mingling with the grime, creating dark streaks that ran across his face, but he didn't notice. Across the shop, a group of mechanics leaned against the walls, arms crossed, heads tilted, exchanging snickers and sideways glances. Their laughter started as whispers, but it grew louder with each passing moment, filling the air with sharp, mocking tones. "Look at him," one said, voice dripping with contempt. "You'd think he bathed in oil every morning." Another added, "Does he even own a shirt that isn't black with grease?" Their jabs weren't clever, but the group's collective energy made them feel powerful, a little pack hunting for amusement at the expense of someone else. Jake didn't flinch, not because he was oblivious to their ridicule, but because he had learned long ago that the world was full of people like this, people who judged surfaces instead of effort, appearance instead of ability. He had grown up with whispers like these in every phase of his life. In school, teachers overlooked him, classmates mocked him. Later, in garages and workshops, the pattern had repeated itself. Someone's sneer, someone's laugh, someone pointing at his stained clothes as if that could define his worth. It had stung, of course. How could it not? But he had learned to let the grease, the sweat, the dirt be a shield, a statement that actions mattered far more than shallow judgment. A wrench slipped from his grasp, clattering against the metal frame of the truck. One of the men laughed a little too loudly. "Careful there, Picasso. Don't ruin the masterpiece." The others joined in, some leaning closer to whisper more cutting remarks, trying to outdo each other in cruelty. Jake's jaw tightened, but he stayed focused. He adjusted a wire, tested the tension, and then moved to a stubborn bolt that had resisted him for the last 15 minutes. His muscles ached, but this was routine, this was comfort. Here, among the engines and the tools, he was in control. Outside judgment had no power, only friction he could endure while finishing what mattered. In the back of his mind, he replayed the years he had spent perfecting his craft. Early mornings spent studying manuals while the world slept. Nights after shifts, working on his own car, trying to understand every nuance of the machine. Every scar on his knuckles, every smudge on his overalls, was a mark of persistence, proof that he did not give up when tasks grew difficult. This grease was not dirt, it was evidence of dedication, a language only those who understood engines could read. Still, the laughter echoed. He could feel the weight of it pressing against his back, a constant reminder that recognition was rare and mockery was cheap. One of the men, bolder than the rest, leaned over the hood. "Hey, Jake," he said with exaggerated cheer, "maybe you should wear a plastic bag next time, keeps all the grease in one place." The group cackled at the comment, slapping each other on the shoulders. Jake exhaled slowly, not because he was angry but because he had long ago mastered patience. He tightened the last bolt, checked the engine one more time, and stepped back. The truck groaned as he lowered the hood. Everything was perfect. Nothing in that engine would betray his effort, even if people laughed at the man who made it work. Then, for a moment, he allowed himself a small, private smile. Let them mock, he thought. Let them point fingers and whisper. None of that mattered when the work spoke louder than words. Someday, someone would see the skill in these grease-stained hands, in this tireless attention to detail, in the quiet perseverance that refused to be broken by ridicule. Until then, he would remain here, crouched over the engine, immersed in the world where competence mattered more than appearances. The shop's clock ticked steadily. Jake wiped his hands on a rag, leaving dark streaks across the fabric. He glanced toward the wall of sneering faces, and for the first time, he didn't see judgment. He saw distraction, he saw insecurity, and above all, he saw a certainty in himself that no amount of mockery could erase. The bell above the door jingled sharply, a sound so out of place in the sea of greasy engines and mocking laughter that it drew every head in the shop to the entrance. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if even the air sensed a shift. Jake straightened slightly, wiping his hands on a rag, instinctively bracing himself for whatever disturbance had entered. The figure that stepped through the doorway was impossible to ignore. Tall, broad-shouldered, and moving with a precision that suggested every muscle was trained, disciplined, and ready. His uniform was impeccable, the insignia of a SEAL team commander glinting subtly under the fluorescent lights. There was an aura around him, a weight of authority that demanded respect without a single word. The other mechanics froze mid-laugh, their mocking eyes suddenly replaced by unease. A few shuffled backward, uncertain how to act. The room that had moments ago been filled with ridicule now seemed suffocatingly small, the walls closing in as the commander's gaze swept across the shop. His eyes landed on Jake, and for a fraction of a second, time slowed. The grease-streaked overalls, the smudged face, the hands blackened from hours of labor, all of it was visible in the sharp, assessing eyes of the man standing before him. And yet, there was no judgment in that gaze, only recognition. "Mechanic," the commander said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, calm but commanding. "You've got skill. Don't let anyone make you forget that." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was undeniable. Jake blinked, momentarily disoriented, unsure whether he had heard correctly. The mocking laughter from before had disappeared entirely, replaced by an awkward silence. The men who had sneered and whispered just moments ago now avoided eye contact, suddenly aware that their petty amusement had no place in this room, that they had been standing in the presence of someone whose respect could not be earned lightly. Jake's heart raced, a strange mixture of disbelief and relief flooding through him. He had spent so long enduring ridicule, so long allowing the opinions of others to roll off him like water on oil, that he had almost stopped expecting recognition. And yet here it was, an acknowledgement from someone whose life experience, discipline, and authority dwarfed the shallow criticisms of the men who had mocked him. He could feel a flush creeping across his cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the quiet pride that comes when someone sees the value you have always known you possessed. The commander moved closer, crouching slightly to examine the engine. His hands didn't touch anything, but the intensity of his inspection made it clear he was not just seeing a machine, he was seeing the work of the person behind it. "Your hands tell a story," he said softly, almost to himself, yet loud enough for Jake to hear. "Every mark, every smudge, every layer of grease, proof of effort, patience, and mastery." Jake swallowed hard, struck by the unexpected depth of understanding. No one had ever looked at his hands this way before, had never interpreted the grime as a testament rather than a flaw. The other mechanics fidgeted, uncomfortable under the weight of the commander's gaze. Their earlier jokes felt hollow, childish, and insignificant, a stark contrast to the genuine respect being extended to Jake. One by one, they shifted their stance, some lowering their heads, others trying to appear busy, pretending to focus on tools or engines as though that could shield them from the uncomfortable truth. Jake's skill was real, undeniable, and had just been recognized by someone whose judgment could not be questioned. Jake felt a strange, almost electric energy in the room, a tension that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with validation. For the first time in what felt like years, he felt seen, not just for surviving, not just for enduring ridicule, but for his skill, his precision, his relentless dedication to his craft. The commander straightened, his gaze still fixed on Jake. "You know your worth," he said firmly. "And don't let anyone, anywhere, tell you otherwise. Not here, not ever." The words sank deep, embedding themselves in Jake's chest like armor. For years, he had built this reputation silently, working while others mocked, persevering while others laughed. And now, finally, someone with authority, experience, and insight had acknowledged it. It wasn't just praise, it was a declaration, a confirmation that the effort he had poured into every engine, every repair, every painstaking adjustment had mattered. The commander's eyes swept across the rest of the shop one last time, a subtle warning in the intensity of his gaze. Respect skill, respect effort, ignore the noise. There's a difference between doing a job and doing it well. Never forget that. And with that, he straightened fully, the room seeming to exhale with him. Jake's chest swelled with a quiet triumph, knowing that the ridicule, for the first time, had no power here. He returned to his engine, hands steady, head held high, feeling the first real sense of acknowledgement in a long, long time. The commander crouched beside the engine, moving with a quiet precision that made every motion deliberate and measured. He didn't reach for the tools, didn't touch the metal with his hands, yet his presence alone commanded attention, and Jake felt the weight of it. The air in the shop seemed thicker, charged with a strange electricity, as if it, too, recognized the significance of this moment. The other mechanics lingered at a distance, unable to tear their eyes away, some biting the inside of their cheeks, others fidgeting nervously, realizing that their earlier mockery had not only been misplaced but absurd in the face of something far greater than their petty judgments. The commander's eyes scanned the engine, following the lines of wires, bolts, and hoses with meticulous care. "Your hands tell a story," he repeated, this time addressing Jake directly, his voice calm but resolute. "Every mark, every smudge, every streak of grease, it's a record of effort, of discipline, of mastery. You don't just fix engines, you understand them. You communicate with them. That's rare. That's valuable." Jake swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in his throat. Words like these were foreign, almost unbelievable. He had spent years hiding beneath the grease, pretending it was nothing, while enduring endless sneers and laughter. And now, someone with authority, someone whose judgment carried weight far beyond this shop, had seen him, truly seen him, for the first time. The other mechanics shifted awkwardly, the air between them suddenly filled with tension. Their earlier jokes now felt hollow and meaningless, echoes of insecurity that shrank under the weight of acknowledgement and respect. One of them cleared his throat, trying to regain composure, but the commander's gaze swept across the room like a blade, making it impossible to meet his eyes without feeling the uncomfortable truth. They had been wrong to mock Jake. Every scoff, every whisper, every pointed finger evaporated in the presence of recognition and authority. Jake's chest swelled, a quiet heat of pride spreading through him. For years, he had measured his worth against the opinions of others, often finding it lacking. Now, the metric had changed. Respect, true respect, was not about appearances, jokes, or empty words. It was about understanding, acknowledgement, and recognition of skill. And here it was, shining brighter than any praise he had ever received. He returned to the engine, his hands steady, every movement precise, but there was a difference this time. The validation of someone who mattered had changed the energy in the room. The commander nodded once, sharply, approvingly. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise," he said, voice ringing clear and authoritative. "Grease, sweat, long hours, these are the marks of dedication, not shame. There's pride here, in this work, in what you do every day. Hold on to it, defend it, it's yours." Jake felt the words settle deep in his chest, a quiet affirmation that could not be taken away. It was as if the grime on his hands and clothes had transformed from a symbol of ridicule into a badge of honor, proof that the value of hard work and skill was finally recognized. For the first time, Jake noticed a subtle change in the other mechanics. Some averted their eyes, others shifted uncomfortably, and a few even seemed to study him with something resembling respect. The mocking energy that had filled the shop hours before had vanished, replaced by an awareness of his quiet strength and competence. It was not instant friendship, nor was it unconditional approval, but it was a recognition of something they had overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated for far too long. The commander placed a firm hand on Jake's shoulder, a gesture both grounding and empowering. "You've got the heart of a warrior," he said, almost quietly, but with a weight that made the room feel smaller, more focused. "Not everyone sees it, not everyone will understand it. But that doesn't matter, you do, and now, so do I." Jake nodded, unable to speak, feeling a sense of vindication and affirmation that words could barely describe. He straightened, wiping his hands on the rag once more, though this time the grease felt different, less like a mark of shame, more like a crown earned through effort and endurance. He glanced at the men who had mocked him earlier. Their heads were lowered, their expressions uncomfortable, but there was no malice left, only an unspoken acknowledgement that he had been right all along. Jake smiled faintly, returning to his work with calm confidence. Every bolt he tightened, every wire he adjusted, every careful motion was now infused with something he had not felt before: validation, recognition, and the quiet power of knowing one's own worth. The commander straightened and gave a final nod toward Jake, signaling that his inspection was complete. He turned and left the shop, the bell above the door jingling once more, leaving behind a silence that was no longer mocking but reverent. Jake's hands moved with steady precision, but now his spirit was lighter. The grease, the sweat, the hours of toil, they all mattered. They had always mattered. And finally, Someone had noticed. Even as the engine purred to life under his careful hands, Jake thought with a faint, wry smile, let them mock. Let them whisper. Some lessons are only understood when they are too late. And for him, recognition had finally arrived, well-earned, undeniable, and unforgettable.